Hello, everybody. I'm James Leichter, president of Aptora. Welcome. I appreciate you being here. As always, every month we do a webinar on a topic really of your choice, Total Office Manager, or any of our software products for that matter. We'd really like to hear from you, and you let us know what you want to hear about. Today we're talking about service agreements. I'm going to present for 1 hour, and then we can open it up to any additional questions that don't get answered during that 1 hour period. I'm going to start by talking about service agreements in general, and then we'll talk about service agreements and how they apply to our software. Why sell a service agreement? First of all, there's lots of reasons. If you are the owner of the company, there's nothing that you can do to add more value to your business than sell service agreements. If somebody wants to buy your business, they are going to ask you about so-called recurring revenue, service agreements, and big shots, suit and tie big shots, the kind of people that can afford to buy a business, well, they are all about recurring revenue. So you will add a lot of value to your business the more service agreements you sell. But what about the employees? What's in it for them? Actually, a lot. Service agreements are one of those things that benefit the company, the customer, and all the employees. And it sounds almost too good to be true. How do the employees benefit? Well, if you're in the HVAC industry, specifically HVAC at stores, then you know about your seasonality. You know that if we drew a chart of sales, that it would look like a roller coaster. You would have this giant peak in the summer, and then here comes the fall, and then comes winter, and then spring. It's that seasonality, that roller coaster ride, that puts so much stress on our industry, our people. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people do not want to work in the HVAC industry, especially in the field, because of the seasonality. You are either swamped or it's dead and there's not enough work to do. With service agreements, you move demand service that's on demand. I demand service right now, get out here. You move those service calls to planned maintenance. You fix things before they become a demand call. So in other words, you detect that a contactor is failing, you replace the contactor on your schedule so that you're not out there on July 4th when it's 100 degrees replacing the contactor, and it's not good for anybody's schedule. That's what's in it for the customer. That's what's in it for the employees. The company benefits. You are moving, and this is the big point, you are moving unplanned demand service to planned visits. In order for it to work, though, people have to think like airplane mechanics, technicians, and not parts changers. If you send parts changers, then they change parts when the part fails. The idea for service agreements to work, the idea is to replace parts where failure is imminent. Failure hasn't necessarily occurred, but failure is imminent. You replace those parts on your schedule so you're not doing it again when it's not good for anyone's schedule. So that's why we sell service agreements. Now let's go back, before we go to the software, let's go back to the days of paper and pen bookkeeping. And I have my system right here. So many of you, some of you might still be doing this, which is fine. Many of you remember, maybe you had a price book. This was our flat rate book that we carried. We would open up our flat rate book, and we may not show it to the customer. Then again, we might. And here's our pricing. So hopefully you can see that fairly well. There's my flat rate price book. So we first consulted the flat rate book for a price on replacing that contactor that I mentioned earlier. And the service agreement clients paid the discount, which is highlighted in yellow right there. That's the investment that they made. So we would quote them the price and ask them, do you own one of our safety and efficiency agreements, or whatever you call them? Do you own one of our service agreements? No, I don't. I wanted to see if you qualified for the $110.88 discount. So we would point to that discount, and then we would try to make the conversion from a regular client, I prefer to call them clients, not customers, to a service agreement holder. And that's not why you're here. Maybe you came to just hear about the software. I'm going to get to the software, but it really helps to have context. This is how the sales process basically works with or without software. You are trying to point out the discount and the savings and convert them from not owning a service agreement to owning a service agreement. And that way you could say to them, I can add the service agreement to the invoice if you'd like me to, and we'll just pretend like you had it all along, and I'll give you the $110 discount today. Many times it's so easy to sell the service agreement because the discount is very significant. If you're out there doing preventative maintenance, it also helps because you can sell them a 3-visit service agreement and make today's visit your first maintenance call, and then another one roughly 6 months, another one in roughly 6 months, and the process repeats with a 2-visit service agreement. If you have any questions about that, feel free to ask. I'll try to address questions during the presentation, not just after, but if nothing else, I'll get to all of your questions after. I'm in no hurry. All right, so it helps to know how that worked. Now, once we're finished, you remember the days where we carried these things? Once we were finished, we'd pull out maybe something like this and open that up and grab 2 things. We would grab our invoice, and then we would grab a service agreement. All right? We do the same thing in the software. That's why I'm talking about it outside of the software. So we have our invoice here, and we would write down the labor, the flat rate task, the contact, or whatever we were doing. And then we would fill out a service agreement form. So we had the model number, serial number, filter sizes, how many visits, etc., terms and conditions, the things you're going to get. That was on the back. We would fill this out, and then we would add that item, a SKU, we would add that to the invoice. So you had 2 pieces of paper to fill out. You had your invoice, and then in addition to that, you had your safety and efficiency agreement. That's what I call them. Your service agreement, you would fill it out, and you'd put the price on the invoice, and it became part of the invoice, 2 pieces of paper. They would get a copy, you would get a copy, and that's how it worked. Now, how much did it cost? When did you sell them? When did you sell a 1-visit, a 2-visit, a 3-visit? What if they had 2 pieces of equipment? Meaning they had, let me say that again. What if they had 2 HVAC systems? What about 3 systems? All of that was covered in your SOP, your company's standard operating procedure. Without that, the software appears to be harder to use. Oftentimes, when I get comments about how hard the software is to use and how long it takes to set it up and how training was very inefficient and we just weren't happy with the training because it wasn't efficient, we didn't get that much out of it. A lot of times, what those stories have in common, the vast majority of the time, like 9 out of 10 times, is the company lacks the standard operating procedure. So they haven't made decisions that they need to make to use the software, but they need to make these decisions with or without software. Like who sells them, how much do we charge, when do we offer them, what are the part numbers, the item numbers, the SKU, etc. Once you have all of that figured out, then software is way easier to use because the software just mimics the paper method. And that's why I wanted to cover the paper method first, because everything you just saw, you probably can relate to. If you're older like I am and you came from the paper method, then you probably were smiling and said, yeah, that's how we used to do it. We even had those aluminum clipboards, just like that. Well, when you have the paper system down, the software is so much easier to set up, understand, and use. It's just that when you don't have that context, it seems a lot more difficult than it really is. All right, with all that in mind, let's talk about the software and service agreements. First of all, do we have any articles on service agreements? We have a bunch of them. I threw this together. This isn't really an official Word document. I put this together just before in preparation for this presentation. I was curious to see how many we had. I might have missed some, but all of these are available. First thing, check out our YouTube channel. There's videos like this one on YouTube, so check that out. Go to our website, aptora.com, and just do a search, and you'll find all of these different articles, and check out our blog. We have more than one on there. I just found one, and I had to get going. I had to finish that, but I think we have more than just this service agreement article on our blog. We have a lot of that material available for you, so please check that out if you're interested. Let's go into Total Office Manager and get things set up. The first thing that you want to do, if you haven't already, is set up your chart of accounts. And even if you have, let's talk about it because you might want to tweak it a bit. Let's go to banking, go to chart of accounts list, open up that chart of accounts. And first thing we need to do is add an income account. We're going to need a cost of goods sold account and some others depending on your settings. So let's add an income account. Notice I have a filter for income accounts. I'll click that. And here on my income accounts, you will see service agreements right there. I'll just open that and show it to you. So I've already created it. You could call this planned maintenance if you would like. Call it service agreements, call it both. But in my opinion, you want all planned maintenance work and all service agreement work, sales. You want planned maintenance sales, service agreement sales. You want all of that to go into one income account. Call it whatever you like. I call mine service agreements. Notice I use the description to explain it. So if you read my description down here, you'll see that it explains what to use the income account for. So if I sell a so-called clean and check, just a one-time thing, it goes here, even though it says service agreements. But I make that clear. When I sell a service agreement, it goes here. When I give a discount, it comes off this income account. The discount comes off this income account. The what best describes this, be sure to select from that list, service agreements. That tells the software that you mean service agreements, because you can call it anything you want. How would it know that this was a service agreement? This won't affect your income statement or your balance sheet. It's used in things like Contractor Compass Dashboard, certain reports, but mainly Contractor Compass Dashboard uses that. That's how it knows this is service agreement income. And because service agreement income is typically recurring revenue, check that box, and again, that just tells the software, hey, this is recurring revenue, otherwise it wouldn't know. So Contractor Compass, the dashboard system, wouldn't know this was recurring revenue until you check that box. So there's your income account. Now that you have that set up, you're going to need a COGS account. It won't be used for much more than labor, but you are probably going to want to point the cost of goods sold to labor, because that's really the vast majority of the cost involved. Now, I'm going to talk more about this in a minute. The cost of goods sold account is not used that often because you're not actually buying a service agreement. But if you're going to pick a COGS account, I recommend just pick labor, field labor, more than I would pick, say, parts and materials. All right, so that is the basis for setting up your chart of accounts. The next thing you want to do is create a department. So let's go to Company, Lists, Department List. Notice my chart of accounts did not have the name of any departments in it. You didn't see labor service agreements, labor install. You just saw labor. You saw parts and materials. You saw equipment. There was no mention of the department. That's because we set up our departments here in the department list. This is our department list where we can categorize all of our income, cost of goods sold, etc. This allows us to print fully departmentalized income statements. You're going to want at least one in here for service agreements. Now I have, in this example, I have commercial and I have residential separated. You may not need to do that. Let's just look at my department here called Planned Maintenance. Notice it doesn't say service agreement. Why not? It's just a choice. You could call it service agreement. I prefer to call it planned maintenance. But either way, Just be consistent and describe it. Get your description in there so everybody knows what that is, and be consistent. Now that we have an income account for service agreements and we have a department, aka also known as a profit center for service agreements, planned maintenance, now that we have that, we're ready to create a service agreement to sell. Now going back to my paper, what are we doing here? We're creating this. So we need to create this form in the software. We have to have something to sell. And this is what we're selling, a service agreement. We might have many different forms. Maybe you did. Maybe you had a residential form, a commercial form for refrigeration, plumbing, whatever. But this step right here is to create an item to sell, or what a lot of accounting people would call a SKU, the stock keeper's unit. But that's what we need to create next, is something to sell. So let's do that. Let's close that. Let me go to my lists and open up my invoice items list so we can see what I have here. I'll click show all, and there we are. Now this is a very small database, so that's all I have in here. In fact, this is an empty database. I chose to use an empty database with absolutely no financial activity in it at all, so that we can see the flow of the money. And we'll do that as we progress. In this list, I have a filter, a global filter called service agreements. When I click it, it'll show me my service agreements. I only have one. Just have one in here. Let's open it up and have a look at it. So the first thing that you do is create a new item, and the type is going to be service agreement. That's the type. And I recommend you create a category, and I have a category called service agreements, protection plans, tune-ups, etc. So create a category. Whatever you choose is fine. Just, again, be consistent, but use a category. They're very important. The part number can be anything you'd like, but mine all start with SA, service agreement, and then a dash, always a dash. So I've established what it is, service agreement dash. I only use a dash when I've established something important, like amperage, voltage, something like that. So the product, service agreement, dash. Again, do anything you want, just be consistent. Then it's res for residential. It could have been com for commercial. Then 02 for 2 visits. And the reason why I have a 0 is 12 visits is possible. So I want the 0 to be there to demonstrate 2 places are necessary. Then 12 is for 12 months. It could be P for perpetual or in perpetuity. Either way. But the 12 in this case means 12 months. Give it a good description. There's your internal description. There's a service description. That's what the customer will typically see. And then when you give them their discount, that's the discount description the customer will see. Labor minutes is not required, and neither is labor cost. That does not have a direct impact on your financials. It's just FYI. So if I think that this service agreement is roughly worth 120 minutes of labor, then I would put in 20 minutes of, or 120 for 120 minutes of labor. Maybe the whole thing might represent more like 180 minutes. When you think about travel time, doing the work, etc., type in 180. You can always change it later. And what's the 180 minutes of labor going to cost you roughly? There are certain reports that give you an estimate, and that's why you're typing that in. Is it fully burdened labor cost? Yeah, make it fully burdened labor. So 3 hours, you might type in $90 or $100. You can change it later. The price can always change. This is the price of the service agreement. The discount, they get 15% off. Let's change that to 15. 15% off if they own a service agreement. There are 2 planned visits, and the length is 12 months. So we have that set up. If I need to enter notes, then I would do that here. Click menu, click notes, and this will pop up. And just type in whatever notes you think would be helpful. This could be a checklist that you could copy and paste from Microsoft Word or something like that. But that's where you would enter notes to describe the service agreement in more detail if you think it's needed. Now let's go to the accounting tab. we need to pick the income account, that's service agreements. And the COGS account, as I mentioned, is not service agreements, it's labor, because typically that's all that's going into this is labor. You don't have to worry about that COGS account too much, though, because chances are you're not going to use it, or you're going to use it very rarely. When you have a part that you sell to the service agreement holder, it has its own cost of goods sold. It has its own income account. When you sell labor, it has its own revenue account, sales account. And when you pay people, that has its own cost of goods sold account. The only time this would really apply is if you were putting it on a check or something like that, and that generally never happens. But it does require you to select something, so select labor. The sales commission, if you care to use it, you can enter a sales commission there. We pay $15. If the tech sells this, they get $15. Now, I'm going to talk more about the escrow holding account and the method in a moment. But the escrow holding account is where you set aside the money if you don't want to recognize the sale as income immediately. In other words, when you sell a service agreement today for $200, you may still have to do the work. So have you really sold something for $200? Well, yes, you have, but do you want to recognize the income? No, you don't. Not my opinion, you don't. If you don't have a lot of service agreements, this is not an important decision. You can always do it later. But if you have 17,200 service agreements, like one client of mine has, they really do, 17,200. It's the most I've heard of. Well, this is critical for them, but it's also very important if you have 500 or 600 or 700. What that means is when you sell a service agreement, the software does not recognize the income. It sets it aside in a holding account. It's actually a liability. The money still goes in your bank or it goes on your accounts receivable, but the other side of it goes into a liability account. A name that you can give it might be escrow holding account, service agreement holding account, something like that. Again, we'll talk more about that when we get into preferences and turn that capability on. So that's about it as far as setting up your service agreement. Don't forget, you have a copy button. You can click Menu, Create Copy. If the next one you want to make is a 3-visit, you want to make a 3-visit agreement, then use your copy button. Because, I'll just do it. Are you sure you want to make a copy? Yes, I'm sure. Now it's going to create an exact copy of what we've created. And here you might just convert this into a 3-visit. And I won't spend a lot of time thinking about the price or anything like that. But I will put in 3-visit right there. Well, I better spell it right. 3-visit. And then I'm going to change my part number to a 3. Everything else is the same. And now I'll hit, labor minutes. I might want to modify that. And my labor cost, I might want to modify that. I should. And I'll hit save and close. And now I've got 3 of them, or 2 of them. And I did it fast. So don't forget your copy feature. It's all over the place. The software has a copy feature all over the place. It's so easy to make an estimate a year ago and make a copy of it today, and the software will automatically renew the information, but you don't have to start from scratch. So look for that copy feature. Now we have 2 items we can sell, and this is comparable to the paperwork that I showed you a minute ago where we have a service agreement form to sell somebody. That's basically what we've created. The pricing, that's in your SOP. When to sell them, discounts, offer the discount now, the discount later, you can pretend like they already had one. All of that is your SOP. Once your company has standard operating procedure, methodology, and writing to do things, again, the software is way easier to set up. Some people pay me to come out to their company and help them set up the software. And to be frank, many people are disappointed in how much I get done or how little I get done, especially in certain areas. Well, what often happens is, I'm fast with the software, by the way. I mean, I'm real fast. What happens is we have to have conversations about what to call it, what part number to give it, how much to charge. Is it taxable? Isn't it taxable? What about this? What about the other thing? Those conversations can take 2 hours, 3 hours. Once they're finished, it takes me just minutes to set it up, just minutes. But we have to talk about the department and the chart of accounts, and I don't want to call it that. Once you establish all that, the software is easier to use. It's fine to nitpick those things. I couldn't think of a better term because it's okay to be picky about it. It's okay, but don't mistake that for the software being difficult to use. Everything about the software gets easier once you have your paper method down. Now, I'm going to pause a second because I understand we have a question, and I'd like to get to that.
Sandy said, don't forget to change the number of visits from 2 to 3.
Ah, thank you. Thank you. Not a question, but a good comment. And that is, and I'm terrible, by the way, at working and talking. I've always been terrible at like explaining things as I do them, and I'll mess stuff up. So her point was, make sure you change that to 3 visits. And that is definitely true. Get that to 3 visits. Now, by the way, once you start setting these up and using them, you can't change the type anymore, but you can change pretty much everything else about it. You just can't change the type. So I'm able to come in there and edit it, and no problem, no foul. I'm going to close that. Now we're going to sell one of these, and I have nothing in the accounting system. So if I were to run an income statement or a balance sheet, I have nothing in the program, not a dollar's worth of transactions, and that just makes it easier to see what's going on. And by the way, I recommend that you have a blank database, blank meaning there's no financial transactions in it. I recommend you have one of those for training purposes, if that's your goal, to train and experiment and test out things, because it's really easy to see what's going on in accounting when you don't have millions of dollars to sort through. So I like to maintain an empty database for that reason. Once I put transactions in it, I just go delete them. I just get rid of them. All right, so let's sell one of those. Let's create an invoice. And if you know me, you know that my least favorite way to start a transaction is to start from scratch. But I do that for the sake of the webinar. You want to go to the customer list, verify their contact info, make sure everything looks good, create the invoice from the customer, because you should verify their info, number one, but also when you come from a record, the software takes that information with it and it makes it easier. From here, I got to start from scratch. I got to go find the customer, etc. So let me go grab that customer. Any customer will do. I don't have a department set up for them, so I'm going to have to pick the department. Now, what department is this? If we went out there for demand service, then the department is demand service. If we went out there as part of a service agreement, then it's service agreement. I hope that makes sense. Even though we might sell them a service agreement, the reason why we went out there could have been demand service. So the department on the work order should have been demand service. And when we create the invoice from the work order, which is the customary flow, then that department would come with it. So I'm going to pick demand service, but I wanted to explain why. There it is. What are we going to sell them? I don't have a lot to sell in this database. So I'm going to pick normally I'd pick a flat rate task, but I'm going to pick, say, a contactor from my list. All right, and it says I don't have any in stock. I did say it was empty, didn't I? I don't even have any contactors in stock, so I really shouldn't be allowed to sell this contactor since I don't have any. So I'm going to pick something that I can sell and not mess up the accounting. All right, so this is what we're selling them. We went out there, we did a repair, we did whatever, and we said, do you own one of our safety and efficiency agreements? I don't. No, we don't have one of those. Okay, I just want to see if you qualified for the $37.22 discount or whatever the discount turns out to be. Yeah, no, I don't have one of those. So what is that? What is that agreement thing? Hopefully they'll ask. If they don't, then you're going to volunteer the information and try to sell them a service agreement. Let's sell them a service agreement. So I'm going to type in SA, And it takes me to my service agreements. The number one complaint we get about our app from techs, plumbers, electricians, techs, is I can't find anything. What do you mean? Well, I type something in, I can't find it. Can't find a motor, can't find a capacitor. Yesterday I found the capacitor, today I can't. That's the number one complaint, no doubt about it. The second one's navigation, but I'll leave that for another day. But the first one is I can't find anything. Can't find what? Can't find customers, can't find items. Well, there's tricks to all this. But for one thing, items, you have to be consistent. Earlier, you saw how I set up my part number. You could set it up any way you want, but my method was not just random. I don't just randomly type characters in there and think I'll deal with it tomorrow. I'll fix it later. No, they're all SA. Nothing starts with SA. Nothing starts with SA dash except a service agreement. That's it. SA dash is always a service agreement. EMT is always an EMT piece of conduit or an EMT connector. Always. And it goes on and on. So ACA is always a thermostat. What? ACA? The others made sense, not that one. But anyway, I have rules. So that way you just start typing in a few characters and it takes you there. And how many service agreements does your company offer? You'll probably have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's only 5 to pick from. All of a sudden that technician says, yeah, finding things is a lot easier now. I'm glad you guys fixed that bug. But it just comes down to nomenclature, have rules. And then the descriptions should be consistent as well. And they should always have certain things in a certain order. And variables like size, shape, color, etc. should always be at the end. I digress. Let's sell the service agreement. So I'm going to pick the one that's highlighted in yellow. And we did that just to say, hey, I'm the one you're looking for. I'm the one you're looking for, because the other one's the discount that comes with it. So I'm picking that right there. All right, so we have the service agreement now on the invoice. Notice the cost each is 0 because it hasn't cost us anything yet. It will cost us when we eventually service the service agreement, but we don't have a cost yet. And everything looks good. So rather than hit save and close here, and I haven't put a discount on there, I'll skip that part. But rather than hit save and close, I'm just going to click menu save. Now it says I have reimbursable expenses. Do I want to use them now? Well, that's a different webinar. I'll say no. But those are things I bought for this particular customer and haven't invoiced him yet. And that's just telling me. All right, so what just happened? The paperwork just popped up. The form that I showed you earlier, the service agreement, I dropped it and it went, phew, it's out of reach. That service agreement I showed you earlier, that's this. This is the paperwork. We're filling out the paperwork. Well, it filled out some of it for us. We would just fill out whatever we need to fill out. Now, it didn't pick the department because you might want a different department than what was on the invoice. So you can change the department. And I think that's a preference. I'm going to do planned maintenance. And sold by, I might want to identify who gets credit for selling it. And it didn't know because I didn't come from a work order. Had I come from a work order, depending on my preferences, it would have already known that. So I'm going to pick somebody. Term begins, term ends. That could be wrong. Just check the little box to override those dates. And you can change those dates if that's what you'd like to do. So it might be that that's more appropriate. How does it know that? Well, it knows the date of the invoice. It knows that this lasts a year. It takes its best guess. All right, so I'm filling out the paperwork. What about air filter sizes and all of that? If we go back to my paperwork, it shows model number, serial number, air filter sizes, how many you need, how many you get, etc. Well, all of that can be done here. You just need to select the equipment. I don't have any equipment in here for the customer, I don't believe. Let me look. Nope, I don't have any equipment in there for them. But we would add the equipment, and that's where we can put in filter sizes and things like that. I can put in notes. I can look at the history. There isn't any history to look at right now, but I can look at any history that we have on this service agreement. But the next step is probably going to be to create the work orders. There are 2 work orders to create because there's 2 visits involved. Even if I did the first visit, I still want to create a work order for it. I just want to mark it as complete. But that's probably the next step, is to create the work orders for the service agreement. You don't have to. You can come back and do them later. But the workflow in my SOP says do it now. Do it now. All right. So again, we get back to that SOP. The software is a lot easier to follow when you had all the paper figured out. And how did we do the paper? Well, when the office got that piece of paper called service agreement, they immediately created 2 work orders and they just set those aside. They set those aside for a rainy day, if you will. All right, so I'm going to create my planned maintenance. You can create a single work order or do your planned maintenance. Click that. And notice how this label popped up, invoice number on this date. You can double click to open that invoice. That's just there for convenience. That way you can see what invoice sold this. What popped up now is a form that allows you to quickly create those work orders. You can create or select a work order type. So I'll do preventative maintenance, and description is a precision tune-up professional cleaning. That's what we call it. That's the acronym. Assigned to, well, I don't know. Maybe I do know. Maybe I have no idea when we're going to do it, but I know who I'm going to assign it to. We have a precision tune-up specialist in the company. Go ahead and assign it. But if you don't know, that's probably pretty typical. Then just leave it blank. The department, well, it grabbed that department based on preferences, and I need to change that because I really want this to be part of the planned maintenance department. Add service agreement notes to the work order notes. When it creates the work order or work orders, you have an option of copying any notes that were in your service agreement over into the notes of the work order. That can be handy. So check that box if that's what you would like to do. And then I'm going to click the auto button, and that creates the work orders. If I want to mark one of them as completed, I can do that now. Now, typically, that would be when you sold a 3-visit service agreement because you wanted to make the first visit that day. So you went out there and said, man, your system's really dirty. Do you own a service agreement? No, I don't. I wish you did, because this would all be a lot cheaper. It'd be just part of the service agreement. Well, I think I'll buy one of those. Okay, that'd be great. I'll make today's visit your first visit, and you'll have 2 more coming in roughly 6 months and 6 months after that. Does that sound good? That sounds great. Get to work. Well, I want to create 3 work orders. I just want to mark the one work order, the first work order, as complete. The dates, it takes a guess. It doesn't know what to put in there. You don't have to worry about it now, but you can change those dates if you would like to. Change those dates. And I'm ready to click OK. So I like what I see. I'm clicking OK. Oh, hey, before I do, for extra credit, and we're going to get into this a little more detail in a moment. Notice it says escrow amount, $98. Yours might just say amount or nothing at all, $98. What that means is we are going to recognize $98 in income when we do that work order. And then when we complete the other work order, we're going to recognize another $98 in income for a total of $196. And that is that escrow movement feature, which, again, I'm going to show you more about that, the accounting part. It's a set it and forget it thing, by the way. Once you set that up, you don't have to think about it anymore. So if that topic seems like it's really confusing, just understand that once you turn it on and set it up, you give it no thought. It just moves money around and you don't have to think about it. I'm going to click OK, and it created 2 work orders. Click OK. And then again, depending on preferences, you'll have this form pop up, which gives you one last chance to deal with them. You can double click on these and open it up and edit it, or just dismiss that form altogether and worry about it some other day. Now, where did they go? Well, they went in the work order list for one thing, but they're on your schedule board. depending on your preferences, they're over in the side of the schedule board. They're not on the schedule. They're on the side, and they're under a filter for unscheduled work orders, and you can use them anytime you want. You have an opportunity to send somebody out there. It's roughly time to go out there and there's nothing else to do. You can drag it onto the schedule board for today, for tomorrow, and use it in that manner. Okay, I understand we have a question. I'll pause for that.
How do you edit the planned maintenance page after it's been created already?
How do you edit what?
The planned maintenance page after it's been created already.
Oh, the plan maintenance page. Okay, so I'm guessing that's the work order. After it's been created, like when I dismiss it here, just understand that it's still out there. You'll find it under your work order list. And what I would recommend you do is create a filter over here for planned maintenance service agreement visits. You can have one for all time that haven't been completed. You can have one like I do that says Precision Tune-Up Professional Cleaning this month. Either way, whatever you do, go find it, because here's the answer. You just go find it, double click it, open it, and then you can edit it. But the trick is how do I find those? You can create a filter to go find them. Now, if you haven't used these filters before, let me right click on a filter and just show you some of the properties. The way the filters work is you give them a name and decide if you want it to be global, meaning everybody can see it, or not, only you can see it. And then you add fields such as type starts with preventative and date this quarter, whatever you need. Work order type begins with, contains, etc. That's how you create those filters. That's how to make things easy to find. Question?
So they said not the work order, but when you're making a service agreement and click planned maintenance. Once it's saved, how can I go back to it?
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. So let me save this and close it. Make sure I've done what I need to do. I can put air filters in there. I'll just save it and close it so I can answer that question. All right, so it's gone. Well, you're never more than 3 mouse clicks away from pretty much anything that you would ever want to go find in the software. If you happen to have the invoice opened in front of you, and a lot of people would never think of this, just right click and you can go to customer job history and then open up their history. And in their history, you will see service agreements. There's a tab. And then you can double click to open it. But what if you didn't have this opportunity? Well, then you can go up to customers and you can go to the service agreement list and find it there. And be sure to use filters like expire this month, last month, next month, whatever. Use filters to make it easy to find things. But either way, all you have to do is just double click to open the service agreement. And there you are. Click menu, and you can go to your create plan maintenance here. Do keep in mind though, if you've already created them, you could be creating them all over again, which you can do, but just be aware of that. If you're interested in knowing if they've been created already, you can look at the work order list. You can look at the customer history and look at the work order tab. You can also go to the history of the service agreement, and it'll show you all the work orders, the estimates, sales, escrow movements, more on that later, but it'll show you all the activity for that service agreement. That way you know what you still need to do to it. Another question, Will?
Is there an easy way for a technician to view equipment that is covered by the plan in mobile?
Yes, the short answer is yes. In mobile, you have the same history form available to you, so you can go to the customer's history. But also keep in mind, well, let me finish that thought. You could go to customer history, equipment, open up the equipment, look at the equipment history. You can also go to the equipment list and look at history. One advantage to that, to having our software, is that no matter who owned the equipment, it could have 3 different owners, meaning 3 different people have lived in that house. You could look at a heat pump and see the whole history regardless of who owned it. So you would see owner A, owner B, owner C, every part that was ever installed in that piece of equipment, the warranty status, etc. All of that's available on the desktop and the mobile. So they have access to all of that. All right. So we got that sold. Let's talk a little bit about the accounting. Here I am in the invoice. I never closed it. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go down to find in GJ, the general journal. And this is for extra credit. Most of you would never need to know this. So if you're thinking, oh my God, I have to remember this. No, you don't. This is only for dorks like me that like this stuff. All right. So here I am looking at the general journal. In the old days, that was the big columnar book. It was usually green and people wrote in it. All financial activity got written into it and it had credits and it had debits, that kind of stuff. Well, that book is in the software. This is the software version. And rather than take you to the whole general journal or general ledger book, rather than look at the whole book, it takes you to just the page, just the part of the page that has this transaction on it. So you can see we have accounts receivable, $305. We have flat rate income of only $109. Why? Well, because we sold them something else besides the service agreement. And then we have the service agreement income, $196. So there is the accounting activity behind it right there. Okay. So let's close that. And I think there was another question.
Can you create service agreements in bulk? For example, we have 2,000 service agreements and manually creating each one might take a while.
Yes. So the question was, can you create them in bulk? First thing is, it may not be the answer you want, but I want to make sure I get it out there. The first thing is that you can import service agreements. So if you have service agreements in an Excel spreadsheet, or if it makes sense to first put them into an Excel spreadsheet where you can use the copy down feature and all of that. If that makes sense, then start with an import, because you can import service agreements. And if you want to know how, then there's a help topic on that. And if you say, well, I don't have that document in front of me, not a big deal. Just go to aptora.com and do a search for it, and you'll find the help topic on importing service agreements. Otherwise, and I was going to get to this later, so I'll be real brief with it because we're going to talk about it. Go to the service agreement list, and depending on the preferences you have, there is a utility in here, batch renew service agreements. If they're already in there, then you can batch renew them. Let's say that you've got the 2,000 and you need to add them. Probably importing them would be wise. If you want to do it by hand, don't forget you have a copy feature, which would make it a lot easier, right? Copy invoices, copy items, copy whatever. But I would probably import them first to get them into the system. But then when it comes to renewal time, use the batch renew feature, and that way you could renew 2,000 service agreements in just a minute, half a minute. In fact, this feature was originally built for the client that has the 17,200. We put this in years ago for them, the batch renewal, and it would do all of those like in 25 minutes. So, you do it at the end of the day, but if you've got 2,000, it should be, 30 seconds or something like that. All right, so I'll come back to that, but that's your quick answer. Use that renewal. I'd import them first if you got a bunch and they're not in there, and then I use the batch renewal and you'll be good. All right, so let's go back to the accounting for a minute. Let's go to reports, go to financials, go to our income statement. And I'll do an income statement for this year, preview, and it'll come up on my other screen. I'll drag it over there. All right, so what are we looking at? We have flat rate income. That was the flat rate task. We have service agreement income, $196. And we have cost of goods sold, nothing, because we haven't paid the sales commission yet. We haven't ran payroll. We didn't pay for the service agreement. In fact, we have a burden because we haven't done any of the work yet. So I don't really want to be recognizing that $196. I don't want to recognize that income. I would prefer not to recognize that. This is an option, by the way. You don't have to turn it on, and in the beginning, you probably don't want it. You can grow into it. But you have an option of saying, when I sell a service agreement, I don't want to recognize $196 in income until I do the work. So how can I do that? Go to Preferences, and you can click the Preference button, or go to Edit, go to Preferences. And in Preferences, we have Service Agreements. There are no personal preferences, my preferences. So there are no user preferences, only company preferences. You can turn on the escrow accounting feature here. And if you hover over it, there's a little tip that pops up that might be hard to read that explains that you can turn that feature on right there. And then also you can say, hey, when a service agreement batch renewal happens, that's the batch renewal I just talked about. When that thing does its job, batch renews, do you want it to create a whole new service agreement, or do you want to extend the dates of the service agreement? People ask me all the time, see, James, that's why the software is hard to use. That's just one of the many things that we struggle with. Well, hold on a minute. What did you do? Hang on. I'm going to reach. Hang on. This is how I'd answer it. What did you do with this? What did you do with this? When they renewed, did you take out the old form and did you mark over the dates? So did you reuse it? And if you did, that's fine. And if you didn't, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. But that's the answer. The answer is, did you take the old form and just mark out the begin and the end date and put new dates in? No, we whipped out a new form. Everybody hated it too because you had to start from scratch. They're all numbered, James. We got a new number. We got a new number we need. So we pulled out a new form and we filled it out again. Okay, that's fine too. Well, either one. The software is just mimicking what you did. You can create a new service agreement, new sheet of paper, or you can extend the dates on the existing piece of paper. Then you might ask, well, what would you do? Well, I don't know anything about your company yet, so I may not give you a great answer. But my short answer is create a new one, because that's what we did with paper. And the software has more information when you create a new one. It has more information available to it, and it can give you better information such as how many people renewed, how many people did not want to renew, etc. So my general advice is create a new service agreement, especially because it's software and you don't fill these forms out from scratch again. It makes a copy of it. So that's what I would pick. That's the preference for turning on the escrow accounting. And again, that means when you sell it, then it shows up not as income, it shows up as a liability. And then when you do the work, then it starts moving that money out of that liability into your income account. Okay. All right. So now let's go to our service agreement list. Go to customers. Go to service agreements right there, service agreement list. And I had it open already, so it just brought it to the front. I just have one because, again, it's an empty database for teaching purposes. Let's open that up. And it's just what we're used to right there. I'm going to close that invoice. If I want to see the invoice, again, double click on that label, and that'll bring up the invoice. That way you can see how much they paid for it and other details that you might be interested in. But there's your service agreement. You can click Menu, and you can click Renew. You can renew it one at a time if you would like. Now, let me explain. One way to renew is to create an invoice and sell them another one. And it'll say to you, hey, they already own a service agreement. Are you renewing that service agreement, or are you selling them a new one? If you're renewing it, then it'll either extend the dates or create a new one. But that's one way to renew a service agreement, create an invoice, sell them another one, sell them the renewal. Another way is to come into the service agreement and renew it. It won't create an invoice, but you can renew it here if you needed to. That's just an option. And now it'll know that it's a renewal. If you imported these and it's a renewal, you could always force it to consider this a renewal. You check that box and you've said, look, it's a renewal. it's a renewal. Mind your own business. It's a renewal. That just forces it. Why do you care? Well, it's good to know how many you're renewing. Out of every 100 that you sell, how many get renewed? So check that box if you need to. Otherwise, it will know that it's a renewal just by proper workflow. All right, so there's our service agreement. That's how we get to it. That's how we edit that. The service agreement list contains a lot of columns for marketing purposes. If you were to go to your service agreement list and click Form Preferences, Show Columns, you might be surprised to see how many columns are there. You've got the address and contact info. It tells you how many visits you sold, how many are left, how many have you not done. So you have all that math in there, dates, etc. Put that into Microsoft Excel if you want, analyze it, do things with it, create mail merges. That's what it's there for. So the reason why we have so many extra columns, like days until it expires and all of that, is to allow you to come into this list and filter it out so you can see exactly where you're at. How many service agreements do we have that are active? How many have visits this month, next quarter? How much money is it all worth, etc. And there's reports, of course. There's reports. All right, so that's your service agreement list. Now from here, we can click Batch Renew Service Agreements with Escrow. And this form will pop up, and it will have a number up here, renewing 1 SA. Yours might say renewing 1,000 SAs. But this is how we batch renew them. If you want to read about this particular feature, you would push F1 as always on your keyboard. It takes you to that help topic, and you can read about it. And remember, we have a ton of help topics. There they are. These are all help topics. So it's going to take you to the main help topic, and then you can navigate to the one that says renewal. There's a renewal help topic in here using the batch renewal utility. There it is. That's going to explain it all, every field. But this is where you would batch renew 1 or more service agreements. You can have a report pop up at the end if you would like. So that way you can print that out, keep that for your records. It will create work orders if you want it to. All your planned maintenance work orders will be created, etc. One thing I do want to mention, and then there's a question we have, is the price. When you renew these, how much are you going to charge for the renewal? Well, first thing you want to do is decide, do you need to change the service agreement type? It's possible that you're changing the 3-visit to a 2-visit, or you are changing an obsolete SKU product to something new, and you don't sell the other one anymore. So decide on that first, then decide, is there a price increase or decrease? Yes, we're going up, say, $10. All right, so is that $10 or 10%? You can do either one. And then you can choose from one of these options if you'd like to. Retail price options. Use the current service agreement retail price or the new calculated price, so 10% more than they paid last time, or $10 more than they paid last time, whichever's greater. Or use the current retail price or the new calculated price, whichever's less. So that way you can get everybody up to the current price, or have them all paying 10% more, $10 more, whatever, whichever's less, whichever's greater. It gives you a chance to easily update the pricing that people are paying for the agreement. I think there was a question, Will?
Sandy's asking about setting up the chart of accounts for the escrow account.
Yeah, so with that, and I just realized, Sandy, that I did not talk about the liability account. Let's click my liability filter here. And if we look at my other current liabilities, I have one called, whoops, I picked the wrong one. I have one called escrow holding account right there. That is the holding account for the revenue, the sales, the income that we haven't recognized. So you would just create an other current liability, And you know what really surprises me, Sandy? I didn't put a description in there. That is totally unlike me. And this is the database that I set up for training, so that's weird for me. But generally, you're going to want to describe what this is for, so that way somebody could come along for the first time and read it and go, oh, okay, this is the one I was looking for. Also under note, you could type in something like AKA service agreement, just so they know it's used or related to service agreements, something like that. But that is your holding account. Earlier, we set up our income account. I chose to call that service agreement, but it could have been called plan maintenance. We have a cost of goods sold account, which isn't really used that much, but I picked labor, field labor. The last thing that we needed to do was to create our other current liability. Call it anything you want, because escrow holding account may not make sense. It may be better for you to call it SA holding account, SA escrow. So, and I find that acceptable. So I'll just type that in, and there you are. And remember, where do we select that? When you turn the preference on, otherwise you won't see it. When you turn the preference on, you'll have a new selector on your service agreements. Under the accounting tab, you'll have a new selector called escrow holding account right there. All right, so another thing I wanted to talk about was this escrow method, and I wanted to wait till the end to talk about these two things because they would just make more sense. The escrow method. Well, it's locked down right now. I'm going to create a new one, or pretend like I'm creating a new one so it won't be locked down and I can show you your choices. We're going to pick a type called service agreement. We're going to go to the accounting tab, escrow method. You've got two choices. You can match movements to work orders, or you can create monthly movements. So what that'll do is monthly movements. Let's say that, to make the math easy, let's say that you sold a service agreement for $1,200 and it lasted 12 months. Then the software will recognize $100 of income at the beginning of every month, and the final month will add or subtract a penny for rounding. So if there's any rounding that's needed, it's done in the final month. The first option, match movements to work orders completed. When you complete the work order, the money moves. So you have a preventative maintenance work order. Let's say there's two, and the service agreement sold for that same $1,200. Then you're going to recognize $600 in income. You're moving $600 out of that liability into the income. The second work order comes along, it gets completed, and it's going to move the final $600 out of that holding account liability and move it over to income. So your income is going to be matching, at least pretty accurately, the event. And that's the so-called matching principle in accounting, and it's actually better to do that. It's better for you because depending on how you pay taxes, cash or accrual, you're not paying taxes on income you haven't earned, but you don't want to report income to management that they haven't earned. You want to show them a liability. You want to show them they have cash or AR, accounts receivable, because of the sale, yes, but you also want to show a liability because you haven't done the work yet. That's a better management report. It's just better accounting. But again, you can move it monthly or move it by work order, your choice. What about these movements? Where do I see them? When you turn that preference on, then these things appear. Otherwise, you're not going to see them. So the next thing you're going to probably notice is under customers, you'll have a new menu option, service agreement escrow movement. And when you open that up, it will show you the money moving around. These are basically adjusting journal entries. They're created by the software automatically. If you open one, you have a limited opportunity to edit it because, again, it's doing everything in the background for you. The only thing you can change is what is white, has a white background. You can change the department. You can add a memo if you want to. Otherwise, you can't change anything about this escrow movement. If you have permission, you could delete it, but just be careful about doing all that. You can also change the date too, by the way. But remember, it's all happening behind the scenes. Typically, an accounting person would make changes if necessary. The basic office people, bookkeepers, etc., it's a set it up and forget it. You don't have to think about those movements. Another question.
Can you do automatic recurring monthly payments for service agreements?
Yes, there's a couple ways to do that. First thing is you can set up. I'm going to give you a fairly short answer. There's a help topic on this, but I think this will help answer your question. If it doesn't, let me know. So the first thing you can do is you can set up invoices and use the copy feature to make it easy, but create your invoices. Then you could take advantage of a feature in here, go to actions and go to batch ePay. We'll see if I have enough turned on. Okay, good. Wasn't sure if it'd pop up because you have to have certain things turned on. This right here would have in it all of the invoices that you had selected. So imagine creating 300 invoices and you memorize that transaction, which is a feature in our software. You can memorize it. So you're telling the software, look, I created 300 invoices. I want you to recreate all 300 every month on the following schedule. They would appear on your invoice list, unpaid. You can filter them by various means, highlight them, click this, the form opens, and then you can hit process. And at that point, it starts running through their credit cards. It starts processing all their credit cards that are on file. And at the end, you'll get a report that tells you who was declined. And then you can run them again, call them, update the credit card information, whatever you'd like. So that's one method. The other method is, instead of an invoice, which assumes that you haven't been paid, you could create the sales. So in my example, I think I said 200 invoices, create 200 sales. A sale assumes you've been paid. So the payment method would be ACH, credit card, whatever. The software will create those every month for you if you memorize them. So again, to be clear, we're going to create 200 sales and memorize them. Tell the software, recreate those sales every month for years. Every month it's going to recreate those sales. The sales assume you've been paid. But rather than run the credit cards, you could set up with your credit card company or your bank an ACH transfer, credit card processing. You can set it up on the internet. So all of that happens without you doing it in the software. So that way, you have 200 sales get created every month. The software assumes all the sales got paid through, let's call it credit card processing. It happened on the internet. How do you know if it happened? Well, you should get a report that it happened, and you should get a report that certain people were declined, and you deal with them the same way you would deal with the invoices that I just showed you could process. But also, you'll catch it during your bank reconciliations, which are one of the most important things that an accountant can do in a company. When you do your bank rec will say, you've got these 200 sales, all of them were paid, and the bank says, no, 195 of them were paid, 5 of them weren't, and you'll catch it then. Hopefully you've caught it before that, but that's the final way of knowing that 5 of them were declined and you didn't get paid. So those are some of your options, and again, there's help topics on this. That way you don't have to worry about memorizing every word I said. Another question, Will?
Is it probably better to do the automatic payments in the software?
Say that again, please.
Is it probably better to do the automatic payments in the software?
Is it probably better to do the automatic payments in the software? It's hard for me to say because it's really personal. For me, it is better. I like doing it in here. I like highlighting them, hitting it, running them. The process is fairly quick. It's all transparent. There's a report. I like it. I like doing it. Other people tell me, no way, James, get with it. Get with the modern world. I don't want to go in there and click a few things and sit around and watch it happen. I want the bank to do it. I want the credit card company to do it. That's fine too. It's personal, but I like doing it myself. Keep in mind, you have a notification email that can go out too. So when it's all done, it's sending out emails telling everybody the card was processed. So really, I like it in here. It's a little extra work, supposedly. But the reason why I don't think it's extra work is because I deal with any issues now. The credit card doesn't go through, I deal with it now. And that's why I prefer it. Any other questions? Okay, so batch ePay. Now keep in mind that batch ePay feature, can be used for lots of things. It doesn't have to be just for your service agreements. It could have been for anything. It just, the reason why we call it batch is it allows you to do 2 or more, but you could do 1, you could do a few, but use it for other purposes if you would like. But typically that's what people are using it for, is recurring revenue. All right, another question I get a lot is, what about service agreements that are like every month, they renew monthly? We sell them and people pay us monthly, and that just goes on forever. How do I set that up in the software? It's the same process, but what trips them up is the end date. In our software, you have to have an end date. You have to have an end date. The end date could be 10 years from now, 5 years, or whatever. You can always extend the end date, but you do have to have an end date. Now, what I would recommend is the end date be a year or two, roughly the amount of time that people tend to cancel. So if they tend to go 2 years and cancel after 2 years, I would have an end date so that I could touch base with them. The end date would serve as my reminder. So I could touch base with them, see how they feel, see how things are going, and possibly improve my renewal rate from, say, I'm making this up, 16 months, improve it to 24 months by having an end date prior to the 16 months. That end date becomes my reminder. Another question?
If you're doing monthly, do you still do the escrow account?
If you're doing monthly, do you still do the escrow account? Depends on the numbers. I would say that if you're going out twice a year, but you're getting paid monthly, then I would prefer the escrow feature be used. Again, because once you set it up, it's pretty much set it and forget it. So I prefer it be used, and that way we have that matching principle going on. We're matching income more appropriately with the visit. It's especially helpful because, as you probably have realized, it's hard to get in people's homes. It's weird. You will sell them a monthly service agreement that goes on forever until they cancel. The fact is they don't cancel typically, but the other fact is, at least in my experience, it's hard to get in there. You touch base with them and they go, yeah, I've been busy, I've been meaning to. It's hard to get in there and do your job. The escrow principle will help with your accounting so that your income lines up better with your work. All right, other questions? Okay, one point I want to make, I want to recap a point that I made first thing, SOP. Using the software, service agreements or not, using the software is way easier if your company has written policies and procedures on how to do things. And then you're just simply getting the software and your SOP to live with each other. You might have to make adjustments to the SOP. Maybe you have to make adjustments to the software settings, workflow. Maybe you need some custom programming or something because you have an SOP that it can't handle and you don't want to change it. You can't change it. But start with SOP, and then the software becomes much easier to use. It's just a lot easier to use when you have the paper method all figured out. And most of us started with a paper method, like I did, but we didn't write everything down, and we should have. It's important to write all that stuff down, build your SOP. All right. With that, just want to remind you, you can go to YouTube, watch videos on this. You can go to our website, go to the knowledge base, start typing a term in, and find all the different articles that we've written. You saw that big list. If you don't need any of that, don't bother. Just start digging in with service agreements and let us know if you need anything. And I hear that we have another question.
Will the consumables used in a Service agreement work order impact the COGS? I completed a work order and I was hoping the parts used in that work order would be captured.
Good question. Okay, so the short answer is no, but let me explain. The accounting system is taking over. When you sell a service agreement for $200, you have no COGS. When do you have COGS? When you send her out or him out, you send a tech out and you pay him. Now you have COGS. What COGS? How does it know? It just looks at payroll. It looks at how payroll was set up, and whatever the cost of good account was for payroll, it looks at it. It also looks at the department. That's important. It looks at the department and says, okay, well, the cost of goods sold was field labor, FICA, Medicare, all that. But it was for a department called service agreements. So now we have our labor COGS. What about our MESO, materials, equipment, parts, all that? What about all that? This is the accounting taking over. Let's say that you had a filter you paid $1 for. Well, whatever cost of goods sold account was picked on that filter, that's the COGS account that it'll use. But wait a minute, that COGS account's parts and materials. I need to know it's for service agreements. That's what the department's for. Because you're picking a department, you can see an income statement for the service agreement department, and you'll have COGS labor, you'll have COGS parts and material, you'll have COGS supply, you'll have revenue sales called service agreements, planned maintenance, whatever you're calling it. So it's just the accounting taking over. Contactors, refrigerant, anything that you use while you are out there, it's just going to look at the cost of goods sold account for those items, not the service agreement. Not the service agreement. Also, it will only recognize COGS when you create the invoice, not the work order. The work order is like a purchase order. It has no effect on accounting. Only when you create your invoice will you recognize costs of goods sold. So hopefully that answers that question. Other questions, Will?
Is there a simple way for CSRs and service technicians to see what service agreement that a customer owns? For example, if a company is offering good, better, best tiered options.
Yeah, so in the desktop and the mobile, there is a service agreement yes or no label all over the place. So you can see I'm looking at my customer list and I have SA no, 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 SA no. If I open one of these, it'll also tell me service agreement yes or no up at the top. If I open a work order, it does the same thing. If I look at a work order list, it does the same thing. It's in mobile. So all over the place, there's a service agreement ownership yes or no. When you go to create a work order in mobile, an invoice for that matter, it will show you, if you have the preference turned on, it will show you that they don't own the service agreement and here's the money they would have saved. It'll also show you they do own a service agreement and here's the money that they did save. There's also preferences to automatically remind you and add discounts, like the 15% discount. You want me to automatically add that? There's preferences for that. So there are lots of systems built into the software to tell you they own a service agreement, they don't own a service agreement. And remember, since a service agreement is something you sold, you have complete history. You can go to the customer's history, you can print reports, sales reports to see the service agreement sales and more. Another question?
So there is another invoice created. So there is another invoice created, but we don't bill it to the customer. So how does that invoice get paid if the payments go to the service agreement?
Say that again. Tell me that one more time. You can word it just like you did. I'm just going to listen harder.
So there is another invoice created, but we don't bill it to the customer. So how does that invoice get paid if the payments go to the service agreement?
Well, so service agreements don't go to a service agreement. The payments don't go to the agreement any more than they went to this piece of paper. The service agreement's just a piece of paper that says you own a service agreement. Just like you bought an extended warranty on an appliance. The extended warranty that you paid for when you bought the appliance, it's on your receipt, the invoice. So the answer is it's the invoice that gets paid. It's the invoice that creates the income, cost of goods sold, etc. The service agreement itself is just another item you sold, but it has a piece of paper that goes along with it. So the contactor doesn't have a piece of paper, it doesn't need one. The service agreement has a piece of paper that goes with it. That's the only difference. The invoice is what gets paid. It's what creates the accounting behind the scenes.
So Sheila said she's trying to figure out how the service agreement invoice gets zeroed out.
Service
Payments to the work order invoices.
So the service agreement invoice gets zeroed out when they pay for it. So you just sold them a service agreement for $300. If they paid you, then it's paid, right? If they haven't paid you, then there's a $300 balance, and they eventually pay you, just like any invoice. The escrow, don't let that part confuse you because it's separate from the fact that the customer has paid you, hasn't paid you, there's a balance. The escrow money is an accounting maneuver that the customer doesn't know anything about. It's an accounting maneuver. It's just shifting the money from a liability, because you haven't done the work yet, to income as you do the work. But the invoice is just an invoice. It's paid, it's not paid, it has a balance, they pay it. Just a regular invoice. No different.
And then we have a follow-up to the question about good, better, best in the tiered options.
Okay.
How would they see which of the tiers they own? There are other spiffs and benefits that are by agreement type, not just that they have an agreement or not.
So I think the question is, how would the customer know what they don't own? If I'm understanding it correctly, they bought from a tiered system, we'll call it good, better, best, since it's language we all understand and use. They bought the good. How do they know there's a better, and how do they know there's a best? I mean, I think that's the question, if I'm understanding it correctly. Well, there isn't any way for them to know that unless the technician tells them. So how would the technician know? Well, one thing is about the mobile software is you have an accept or decline button. It is a preference that you turn on, turn off, but the software will keep track of what people have declined. You can offer a good, better, best, and they can say no, no, and yes. And now the software has a record of what they have declined. How does a technician get to that information? It just depends, but that information is in there. They can pull up the invoice, for example, and show them, hey, you declined the good, better, and you took the best, or whatever it happens to be. So there's many ways to do that, but if you're trying to show someone what they didn't say yes to, like they said yes to add refrigerant, they said no to find and fix the leak, probably the software would know that if you're using that decline feature. The best place to go, I think, is their history. Maybe the history of the heat pump, the history of the customer. Go to the history, open up that work order or invoice, show them that they declined it. And there are reports, by the way. There's reports, custom reports, that will go looking for things people have declined. Not to get too nerdy here, but in the database, there's a flag that says, I was declined. So we know everything that was declined in the software, and that can be put into reports. So you could say, give me a list of every item that was ever declined in 2025. Other questions?
Bridget just said, we're trying to find the tier owned easily without having to dig through history.
So tier owned, if I'm understanding that correctly, then what she's getting at is, I need to know what tier they own, what tier of service agreement they own. Well, what I would recommend, and you could do this in mobile, you're looking at the desktop, but it's the same in mobile, is go to that customer's history. There's always a shortcut. So here I am looking at the customer. I'm going to go into their history right there, and I'll go to the service agreement tab. And what you probably want to do is just make sure that you have service agreement types that tell you what you need to know. like good, better, best. That's the tier. So the type itself could have the tier value in it. You could do it other ways, but that's how I would recommend it, is the type also represents the tier, and that's how they would know quickly which one they had. So hopefully I understood that dilemma properly, but that's how I would find out what tier they had of a service agreement. All right. Final questions today on service agreements? All right. Count down. 5, 4, 3. Okay. One more question? We're debating whether or not we have one more.
The service agreement does not include any parts. So if they replace a capacitor or add refrigerant during the service, how do we get paid for the parts and refrigerant?
Oh, yeah. So the easy answer is just do what you normally do. So in other words, my service agreement means I'm coming out to your house today. And what do you get? Well, that should be clear. You're getting a precision tune-up, professional cleaning, a standard filter, maybe. Just made that part up. Whatever you want. You decide. So it'd be like, tell me how the paper method works. So again, the paper method is your answer. I go out there and do my job. What do you do out there? What's included? Whatever the piece of paper said. All right, so now I have to add refrigerant and replace a contactor. Well, that goes on the invoice. They do get a 15% discount or whatever discount you decide to offer, but that goes on the invoice. I add the refrigerant, and I add the labor if that's necessary, or the flat rate task. I add the contactor. I just create the invoice as I normally would. And then the software, depending on your preferences, will say, hey, they own a service agreement. You forgot to give them their 15% off. Do you want to do that now? And it'll add that to the invoice or to the work order. But the answer is you're just creating the invoice like normal, but you're probably giving them a discount because they owned a service agreement. And that will recognize income, cost of goods sold, etc., normally, without regard to a service agreement. Here's one difference, though. The department. I'm asked about that all the time. What department is that? That's your service agreement department. Yeah, but we did repairs. We did demand service. No, you didn't. You did service, not demand service. That's why I insist on using that name, demand service. You did service on your schedule. Good for you. That was the whole idea. So what department does that go to again? On the work order, which carries over to the invoice, the department was whatever you called it, service agreements, planned maintenance. That's the department. Now, when we evaluate the profitability of selling service agreements, we're also recognizing the income from that contactor, refrigerant, etc. And that tells us if the whole program is profitable. Because without those extras, you're probably almost certainly losing money. And that's the whole idea. It's a loss leader. The whole idea is to lose money on just the service agreement. You make it up on legitimate repair work. Another question?
What if they already paid for the service agreement up front? This is the second service of the ×2 agreement.
Yeah, so, and they can hear you reading that question, right? And then they can see it, so I don't have to repeat it. Well, again, the answer is, unless I'm misunderstanding the question, the answer is nothing really changes. Even if they prepaid the service agreement, they haven't prepaid for the contactor, as I understand it, or the refrigerant, which we're using in this example. So you're creating an invoice, not for the service agreement, that was paid already. You're creating an invoice for the contactor, for the refrigerant. But again, maybe you weren't around in the paper world, and I don't mean that, in a snide way. I'm just saying you might be younger than me and you didn't come from paper. But in the paper world, we would go out there and do your precision tune-up. We still filled out an invoice. The invoice could have been a zero. And it would say precision tune-up as part of service agreement. I did this, I cleaned that, I did the other thing. I'm supposed to fill out an invoice completely. But I don't charge you for anything. Well, but in this case, I needed refrigerant and I needed a contactor. So I add those to the invoice that would have otherwise been zero. So that's how we handle that. Okay. All right. Well, that concludes our service agreement webinar. and I enjoyed it a lot. We had great questions. That was awesome. Thank you so much for all the questions. That's my favorite part, answering questions. And I will look forward to seeing you in next month's webinar, which will be on what? Well, it's going to be on whatever we say, unless you tell us what you'd like. And we'd like to hear from you on that. Once again, I'm James Leichter. I'm the founding president of Aptora, and I love talking to you guys. Thanks so much for being here. Good night.